Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our first edition of Inside the Pigskin of 2023. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Thursday. And, let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about before I introduce the crew. Last night on the Sports Exchange, we talked heavily about late Detroit Lions wide receiver Chuck Hughes. And guess what? We're going to talk about that subject again, but with a different crew tonight. The title of this episode is called More Reflections on Chuck Hughes. Now, introducing my crew, I want to talk about the controller of the South Florida Tribune, Candy Ebling. Welcome back, Can.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
And Smoking Jeremy. Welcome back, Mr. Lion.
Hey, it's great to be here as always.
Well, we enjoy having you back. And, of course, my star running back and good friend and brother from another mother, my longtime friend, Mel Farr Jr. Welcome back, Mel. Glad to have you on again, partner.
Hey, great to be back. Happy New Year to everybody.
Thanks. And don't forget my happy birthday because I turned 60 last Thursday night. So whatever.
I sent you your happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Yeah, we all did.
Yeah, you did it privately too. I was impressed, Mel. And I got to tell you, but I know I have family now in Wisconsin probably going to watch us at some point. Let me tell you, you couldn't have a better birthday than I did with the group I have with Candy's family. I mean, you name it. I'm not mentioning the names. I had one of the best birthdays I've ever had. It's amazing when you have a 60th birthday and you're losing family members, and then I got a crew up there. And what did we do? We went to Dave and Buster's Candy. We went over to, where did we go after that?
We went go-kart.
Yeah, go-kart racing, and then, of course, went over to Wisconsin, big boy. So great time by the family up there. It was well worth the 365-mile trip over the holidays, but I'm so glad to be back doing what we enjoy doing. All right, well, as I said, more reflections on Chuck Hughes. We did it a lot last night. We'll go into some detail, and we have a couple interesting NFL games to go over. Well, Mel, first of all, let me ask you, how much of a recollection do you have about Chuck Hughes' death?
It's very vague. I remember it. I mean, I definitely remember it. I remember being in the basement of our home. I was probably about 5 years old. I was 5 years old. And I don't know if we were listening to it on the radio, me and my brother, or watching it on TV. I can't really recall, but I do remember when that happened and asking my dad some questions about it. And don't necessarily remember the conversations that we had, but I do remember being very inquisitive about what had happened, what had transpired that day, because that was something that, obviously it had never happened, and it shook the Lions. Obviously, they were in playoff contention that year and had a very difficult time after that, as far as winning ball games after the death of Chuck. And I read some articles about it recently to find out, a little bit more about him, because I really didn't know a whole lot about him. I read an article, I think it came out, I don't know, seemed like 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago. I think I even subscribed to the Detroit News just so I can get the entire article,
right,
and read it, and found out a lot of nice things about him, and stuff about his wife, and what she went through, and different things of that nature. But it seemed like he was a really, really good guy. And it was just one of those unfortunate situations that happened. It has, that I don't believe it ever happened before, and it hasn't happened since, where a player actually passed away on the field.
Yeah,
of course, with what happened this weekend, I couldn't help but think about that. Right. A lot of people, and I found it ironic that a lot of the pundits were saying, and these are guys who've been around football for a long time, and they're the ones that been around football a long time, in the 60s and so forth, and don't recall anything like this happening. And I'm like, man, really? Are you serious? I mean, that's the first thing that came to my mind. But I guess maybe if you're not from Detroit or Chicago, you may not be aware of that.
That's a good point too, Mello. And that leads me to my next question. You talked about your dad, and I know a lot of it's vague when you're as young as you are, and I attended the game. Did your dad ever tell you any stories about this per se?
No, I can't. I can't really recall any stories. I mean, I recall us talking about it. We might talk about it from time to time, because that's something that never had happened before, and hopefully it'll never happen again. It might bring his name up, but I never really had any in-depth conversations about it. And I really, I hate that I hate that you asked that question. Well, not hate that you asked that question, but I don't have an answer to it because now, the older you get, the more questions you have about things. Asked a lot about him growing up in Southeast Texas. Heard a lot of stories about that, but I never thought to ask him a lot of questions about that particular day. And unfortunately, I don't have that opportunity to do it now.
No,
I could ask my mom about it because she was there at the game, and so I probably will ask my mom about that because I'm sure she and he, I'm sure they had conversations about it, and she could probably pass some of that information on to me.
Yeah, amazingly enough, Candy and I heard about the news as we were driving back from Wisconsin, mind you. Riding back there and all of a sudden getting alerts big time. I think, wow. I mean, and nowadays your major networks aren't going to show it because they don't want to show it at all. But to me, I think the thing that amazes me is I often wonder, do you feel that if Chuck had the same medical attention that Damar Hamlin had, that it would have made a difference in saving his life?
Yeah, I don't know. Can't really answer that question. Just from reading the article, Damar's heart stopped for whatever reason. Chuck Hughes, they say, had a heart attack caused by a blood clot. So I think there might be a difference there. It may not. I don't have an MD, so I really couldn't answer that question for you. But you would like to think that if they had the same type of medical equipment back in that day, back in the day, that he may have been able to survive. I mean, you just think about the advances in medicine nowadays. I mean, Billy Sims tore his ACL and never played again. Guys tear their ACLs now, and they're back good as new, if not better now. So, injuries that used to be career-ending are no longer career-ending. And you'd like to think that with the advances in medicine, with the what we know as far as CPR is concerned and using the AED devices and things of that nature, that he might have had an opportunity to survive that.
Yeah, amazingly enough, we did about an hour of sports exchange last night here on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. I had a really great crew. We spent the entire show talking about this. And I think one of the things that probably occupied a lot of the show was a lack of acknowledgement by ESPN, with the exception of Pardon the Interruption, where you have Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser addressing it in their opening segment. I was amazed that even a guy like Herman Edwards, who's 68 years old, been in football 55 years, hadn't heard it. And I was disgusted, to be honest, when you see a guy like him. Herm, you're 68 years old, and you haven't heard of this? And does anybody out there ever
doing the math?
Google? What's that?
I was doing the math because he kept saying I've been been around football for 55 years, and I'm doing the math. 55, 22, 55. I'm trying to do the math. Yeah, Herm, you should know about that.
Right.
I know. He's never seen anything like it. I'm doing the math. 55 years as a player and coach. I'm 55, 2022 minus 55. That should put him right in there where he should have heard about this. I mean, a lot of guys that I went to school with, I'm sure. I mean, we talked about it. Just one of those things that you would talk about. But a lot of those guys that I went to school with wouldn't know about it. But I know about it because, again, my dad played. Obviously, we're listening to the football game. And, I lived in the city of Detroit, and that was a big deal. It was a huge deal.
Yeah,
because it's never happened before.
Yeah, and yet, amazingly enough, the negligence of ESPN was so bad that a lot of them said it's never happened before. I'm thinking, wait a minute, who the heck is doing your research over there? Because evidently you're not doing it. And listen, I know Mike Greenberg's only been in the business 30 years. Okay, I'm not, and Stephen A. Smith. The only one that could have had a chance had he been on Tuesday might have been Mad Dog Chris Russo, because he's a big historian guy anyways. But by the time they got around to him on Wednesday, the broadcast was obviously scaled more towards week 18, and a lot of everything had been said. But Chris Mad Dog Russo would have, and he schools Stephen A. Smith all day long, the historical stuff. And I'm not getting into their shows in particular, but I know Mad Dog Russo, while he didn't mention it that day, I wouldn't be surprised if he mentioned it on his other platforms. But when I think of Greenberg, and I even think of when I heard it on SportsCenter that Robert Saleh never heard of it, and he's from the Detroit area outside of Dearborn, Jim Kelly, I guess, never paid attention, even though he's up in Buffalo, and he's certainly going to focus on,
Robert Saleh is much younger than both of us.
Yeah, right.
He's younger than me.
Well, I
He
mean,
wasn't
the
even
whole
born.
idea is this, okay? We obviously wish our thoughts and prayers to Damar Hamlin, and I'm just glad he didn't become the second one to die on the field. Mel, I attended the Mike Utley game and the Reggie Brown game. Those weren't easy games to go to either. But the one with Hughes happened when I was 8 years old. My dad took me there. George Eichhorn was actually at the game too. And, I went with my dad. I said, does this usually happen very much? He said, no, not at all. I mean, he was emphatic it didn't. And I had nightmares about the thing being an 8-year-old child is what I was. And I slept in my folks' bed that night. And I have a blog on scottsports33.com where I actually connected a while back with Chuck Hughes' family when I wrote one of my first ones, and they thanked me for bringing it up at that time. I don't want to get into the logistics. I wrote it many, many years ago. But I wanted to take the opportunity this week to realize that Chuck Hughes' legacy, to me, even though he was a part-time player, didn't play a lot, to me should not be forgotten. And unfortunately, it seems like so many people out there have forgotten it. And I'm trying to bring more awareness to Chuck and his family, and also call out media outlets that didn't even recognize that it even took place at all. And get smart with your reporting, because what I'm going to do now, I mean, I can't dictate what I'll watch on any given day, but I'll scale back my activity on some of these networks if I think the reporting is not informative enough and they haven't done the research. There's certain things that you have when you're a sports reporter, sports broadcaster, and you better be researched and you better be prepared. And if you do, you become a better broadcaster. And unfortunately, I think sports media took a hit earlier in the week by only one outlet, okay, or one group, couple guys mentioning it. And what amazes me about ESPN and the way they were so negligent is if they really want to get smart, don't they watch other shows like PTI and know that these guys mentioned that they couldn't have piggybacked off it a day or two later? Now, I didn't go on there today. I know the focus is on Damar Hamlin and the fact they're probably not going to play the game. It'll be a no contest. I don't care about that. That's not what this show is all about tonight. This show is about bringing you on, Mel, to know that, your dad played for the Detroit Lions, really good running back. I saw your dad playing, and I thought he had a short but fine career. And to have you on my broadcast week in and week out is nothing more than just I'm just delighted to have you as my colleague, Mel. That's how much our friendship and everything means to me. I just cannot believe, to me, that we have so much more resources for research that so many more people missed out on this one. Mel, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch ESPN too much. I did watch it that particular day because Shannon wasn't. I wanted to see what Shannon was going to say, but he wasn't on that morning because he had a problem with something that Skip had tweeted.
Right.
And Skip Bayless talks about how he goes back to the '60s, watching Dallas Cowboy games. His dad taking him to the Cowboys games back in the '60s, and I'm like, okay, '60s. Okay, this happened. I didn't remember exactly when, but I knew it happened in the early '70s. And because I knew my dad retired in '73 and my dad was still playing.
Right.
And he said he never seen anything like this before. So I'll be totally honest with you. I stopped watching it. I've been watching the House vote for the last 2 days and watching that circus because I just couldn't watch because, like you said, how could they miss out on something like that? Either maybe they don't want to remember something like that. I don't know because they don't want the people to think that the game is so barbaric. I don't know why, but they definitely overshadowed it. Now, I didn't watch all the shows. I didn't watch that. Normally watch Colin and then the other shows I really don't particularly care for. But I watched the Herd. I didn't watch the Herd this week again because I was really kind of just upset that Shannon wasn't on there. I really wanted to hear from a player standpoint what Shannon had to say about it, and then the fact that Skip didn't even remember it. And then I did switch over to ESPN. I said, well, maybe these guys are talking about it. And Herm Edwards gets on there. He's talking about, in my 55 years as a player and a coach, and I'm doing the math on that 55. That should put you about 1967. Right. Okay. Again, I didn't know exactly what year it happened, but I knew it was early 70s because of when my dad retired. And he said he never seen anything like that. So then I just turned it off, and I've been watching that fiasco on CNN.
Yeah, it's amazing too. And especially in preparation for last night's show, the Sports Exchange, because again, my crew, I had Jacob Christner, I had George Eichhorn, who was also at the game. I didn't know him back at the time, but Jacob Christner, JB Ellis, George Eichhorn, and Rick Curdy. We had a crew of 5 people. And during a particular segment, Mel, on our show last night, George and I reflected on us just being at the game while Jacob, Rick, and JB they knew that they just wanted to absorb what we were talking about. And they were thrilled that they had 2 guys on that had been at the game and added it to light. Now, I got to give JB Ellis a lot of credit because he's the one that told me that actually PTI had it on. And I got to see the replay at 6:30 Eastern time, I recorded it. I'm thinking, thankfully, that somebody was able to talk about it. But then again, when you talk about Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, they're 2 of the best in the business. These guys are hardcore journalists to me, and they become excellent broadcasters. I can tell you right now, and I don't want to get into the ESPN thing too much because we have a couple other topics that we're going to address tonight. But to me, Kornheiser and Wilbon are Hall of Famers for a lot of reasons. They are. You read their stuff, it's great. You hear the way they are, the debate is friendly. And I remember when PTI first went on the air back in the early 2000s, I was living in Arizona. I bumped into Mike over at Sun Devil Stadium because that's where the Cardinals were playing before they moved into their new place out in Glendale. And Mike just said, it's new. We're just developing our show and chemistry. And obviously, it's been a winner for a lot of years. I mean, the shows I've always liked were Mike and Mike. I think they were great. As well as the sports reporters was one that I got to know Bob Ryan really well. And Outside the Lines, educational kind of stuff, magazine file. And I will tell you right now, Inside the Pigskin is created here with the intent that this is a magazine style format, is what it is. And that's what I love about a lot of the shows that we have, is I'm not here to give you game updates where 9 million people are going to do it. Shows like Inside the Pigskin, as well as 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, and a lot of the Fire Up shows fall along the magazine. I know, Jeremy, you're chomping at the bit to say something, so give me 10 seconds to finish my thought, and I'll turn to you, my friend. Okay. So, yeah, I guess, Mel, I'm with you all the way. And I was actually bewildered, befuddled, and then Herman Edwards, all people didn't know. Oh,
yeah, disappointed. It was disappointing.
Yeah, it was. I mean, 12 hours of programming. I wasted my time just to go out there, and it only took one 30-minute show that somebody knew anything, and they don't watch that. I mean, there were so many flaws there, it just made me ill. So, okay, I know we've talked about this a lot. I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, and I'm going to turn it over to Candy. And you've obviously seen what we talked about with Chuck Hughes. Jeremy, give me your thoughts, please.
Well, number one, there's something that players don't like to be faced with because they say all the time that they die for their team and die for their teammates. No one likes to be faced with their mortality. So subconsciously, you pack it away when stuff like that happens. And I think that's what happened in the case of Herm Edwards at the time, because he would have been a player at the time when Chuck Hughes passed away. Like you guys were saying, I know you were a little older than me at 5 and he was 8. I was 1 year and 15 days old when Chuck Hughes passed away. But I still had at least the acknowledgement when I wrote my editorial the day after the incident with Damar happened to put it in there because I wanted to educate the people that are following me because that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. As a fan, we're faced with mortality on different levels every day, whether it's celebrities, sports people, family, friends, pets, children even. That mortality is faced with us in the normal world every day. We use sports entertainment as a release from that mortality. And to see it happen, it brought back so many memories for myself. I mean, literally, I had to stop my podcast. I said thank you to my sponsors and said who they were and didn't even give their spiels because I was crying.
All right. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're broadcasters, podcasts, whatever you call, but we have minds, we have hearts, and I can tell you right now that when I heard it, it's like the first thing, my first instinct here is how many people are going to recognize it, and And to me, it's just been a frustrating week to see the lack of recognition or anything that Chuck Hughes. And that's why I've taken 2 nights this week to bring on different people to get their points of views about the same subject. So, like anything else, I want to take the time to, number one, I hope and pray that Damar Hamlin makes a good recovery and then he can at least live somewhat of a decent life. I really do. And, when I heard about it, I just hope and pray that the new updated medical technology would allow this young man to make a recovery. I should point out the show can be heard Inside the Pigskin can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Everyone helps. That way you can get all of our remote broadcast, media availabilities, and whatnot. And listen, if you have any suggestions at all, feel free to contact us as well at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If your suggestion is really good, I will even give you an opportunity to participate on the show. But that said, Candy, go ahead. Please provide me with your thoughts about this whole Chuck Hughes thing. I know in our mind, you being a division rival here, okay, it doesn't matter if you're a division rival or not. This is human. And I can tell you right now, having been to many, many games, that when you come across a serious injury like this or anything that's very, very sad, players really go on the field and they're one. They aren't teams anymore. They're just unified as one. Go ahead, Candy.
Well, I have to say that I was alive during one Chuck Hughes, but I did not know about it until I met Scott, and Scott told me about it. I think from a different perspective that we've come a long way because they interviewed Sharon Hughes, the widow of Chuck Hughes, and she said that he died from a heart attack from a blood clot. And let's face it, the medical equipment was not the same back in the day. They applied CPR on Chuck. It didn't work. They knew that he had died on the field. They wheeled him off in a stretcher. She was there. And then, to be honest with you, they finished and they played the rest of the game.
Yeah, wasn't there like little over a minute left in the game?
Yeah, 62 seconds, 1 minute and 2 seconds. It was in a complete silence. I remember that big time. It's like, you know what? The Lions were actually, Candy, and Mel, you probably know, and Jeremy, they ran out of timeouts and they were doing the 2-minute drill, and he had 1 minute and 2 seconds left, and they turned it over on downs after it was over. But you could hear a pin drop at Tiger Stadium. But there's a difference between 1 minute and 2 seconds, 1 minute and 2 seconds compared with the Bills and the Bengals, where you had 3 quarters. But yeah, they did continue it, and it was a complete silence, and it was just a forgettable day. It really was. Go ahead, Andy, continue.
One of the things they're talking about, they interviewed some of the players and stuff like that. And one of the players from the Bears thought that Chuck went down, like faking it, because it was in the last 2 minutes. They didn't know the severity of it until motioned for the medical professionals and everybody to come out there. I just think we've come a long ways. Do we know if Chuck would have survived if the same thing happened today? We don't know. And I'm not a medical professional. I have no idea. But even a doctor couldn't necessarily say yes or no because everybody's different. I thought it was interesting how Sharon Hughes said she was watching the game. She stayed up even later that night because she didn't want him to be the second person to die on the field. So she kept staying up as late or awake as much as she could until she got an update that he was still okay. They interviewed Chuck's son, and he talked about how he's willing to talk to the family if there's anything that they can do. He says that the medical profession has come a long way, that the NFL now tests for the condition that Chuck Hughes was undiagnosed before. and now they do test for it. So
Was it a form of arrhythmia? Do you know what it was?
it was an undiagnosed heart disease, and that a blood clot in the clogged artery had dislodged, possibly from a hit that he took that game. But they also said that it was likely his second heart attack and that the first one had gone undetected. And he had been hospitalized 7 weeks before for what doctors had appeared to be a spleen, lung, or kidney injury. So he wasn't healthy. I mean, I'm not saying that Damar, obviously, what happened, we know all, the ramifications. They have heard that he is attentive. He is writing and communicating with family. He is still on a ventilator, so he can't talk, but he can pencil and write. And one of the first things he asked was, "Who's in the game?"
Right. And the
Jeremy, go
doctors
ahead.
replied. The doctors replied to him, "You won the game of life."
Yeah, that's pretty inspiring
Yep.
there. And the only thing I'll say about it is I'm just glad he wasn't the second one to die in the field.
Yeah, I mean that goes without saying. Yeah, I mean nobody wants to see anybody die like that. But the fact that they had to do CPR for 9 minutes is the thing that scared me the most, because when I took CPR training, they say every minute past 5 minutes, at that point you're at a 5% chance of mental retardation due to lack of oxygen. And every minute after that, it increases by 10%. And the fact he's able to write and ask those questions is amazing after 9 minutes of
Yeah,
CPR.
And my
Didn't they
grandson,
say
he was
they had
born
to do
blue.
CPR at the hospital as well? They had to do it
No,
twice.
nope. They didn't put him in the ambulance till his heart was beating. He just
Right.
wasn't breathing,
Right,
so
but
they
I
had
thought
to
he meant
use
at
the
the
bag vent.
hospital.
Yeah, no, I will say this. Well, I've been very hard on ESPN after the fact. From what I've heard and seen, Joe Buck, Troy Aikman did a really good job. Lisa Salters, you could feel it in her voice, and a lot of their talent there did really well the night of. But that doesn't, to me, excuse the aftermath of the fact that, you know what,
Right.
I understand what happened then, and of course they're professionals, or they get paid well. Okay, so it's their responsibility to do what they've got to do. Is I think the aftermath of what ESPN has done has been nothing short of awful. It just, to me, it violates journalistic standards, to me, for which
Oh,
you
absolutely.
have more resources to research, and they came up so far short that, to me, I can say bring back the old
It's
people. We're not going to go any deeper than
it's
that.
pretty sad that I'm in a couple of NFL chats and I've had 18-year-old fans go, "Hey, Jeremy, do you know about Chuck Hughes?"
Yeah,
And I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course I do. I'm a Lions fan. Why wouldn't I?" But that's another story. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah, a heart attack has happened on the field, because anytime your heart stops, they call a heart attack cardiac arrest all the time now.
right.
So a heart stoppage
Well,
is a
there's a
heart attack.
there's a difference. There is a difference, I believe, between your heart stopping and a heart attack. There is a difference.
All right. Well, you know what?
Again,
I think
I dropped out after the first semester of medical school, and I couldn't take it. But there is a difference.
now I'll only add one thing, even though it's not related to Hughes. The recent passing of Mike Leach, the Mississippi State University head coach. He had a heart attack immediately, and so much time elapsed that,
He had a massive heart attack.
yeah, he did, and they couldn't get the proper attention where it spread to his brain. And unfortunately, rest in peace, Coach Leach. You know,
Well, it's like what Jeremy said. I mean, the longer and longer you go without
right,
that blood circulating, oxygen getting into all your different organs and all that kind of stuff, then things start shutting down on you. And I think I think they already knew he was at that point initially when they first reported it, or shortly after they first reported
right.
it, because they harvested a lot of his organs um, during that particular time, and then I think they came out whatever day they came out and said he had passed away. I think it was whether it was Sunday or Monday. I can't exactly remember.
Right. No,
But my grandson dealt with a similar thing when he was born premature, because something happened. My daughter, her uterus, something happened. I can't remember exactly what it was called. So he was without oxygen. They had to resuscitate him twice. So they didn't know how long he'd been without oxygen. They didn't know. So one of the things that they do, and I think they did it with Damar as well, is they cool the body down because that slows down any type of brain problems, potential brain problems that they could have from the body just being at a normal temperature. That slows it down. So that's one of the things. My grandson, for the first 24 hours, they basically cooled him down, had him cool down 28, 48 hours. And then, we're still trying to, it could have been anything from, cerebral palsy, spina bifida to nothing. We don't know because we don't know how long he was without oxygen. But, happy to report that, he's only thing he has the things that we have to deal with, that we have to work with him is hearing. He has to wear some hearing aids for right now. But as far as everything else, speech and walking and talking and all that other kind of stuff, it's really a miracle. And, again, this here is really, there's some great people there that helped him out. But, you have to say this is a miracle that he's in the position that he's in right now. Because when it first happened, again, I wasn't watching the game. I got the alert like you did. I said, well, man, I need to see what's going on. And it didn't look good.
No,
and the
it didn't.
First thing I'm thinking in my mind is like, oh boy, here we go again.
Yeah, right. That was me. When I got the alert, I thought the same thing. Candy, why don't you read the comment from Big Dan Davis?
Yeah, that's one of my fans from my show.
Good. Well, I'm glad he's tuning in. Well, don't read it, show it. She's our controller.
One of Hamlin's former teammates, Harrison Phillips, who's current. Oh, I was reading it.
That's all right.
Okay.
Well, go ahead. Finish what you started.
Okay. One of Hamlin's former teammates, Harrison Phillips, who currently plays for the Vikings, I might add, bought food for everyone in the ICU who was taking care of Damar, and he plans on doing it again. What an awesome act of kindness.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. We appreciate you putting that out there very much. All right. So, yeah, it's just amazing. Life's too short, and I'm just glad that we can pay a little more attention tonight about Chuck Hughes. And Chuck Hughes, you're always going to be in my heart, my mind. And to me, to see that you pass away, right now, the way sports media and ESPN makes me feel like you're Rodney Dangerfield. You didn't get any respect simply due to the lack of research and negligence out there in terms of how people didn't recognize Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser. All right, well, a couple other topics. I think we've talked this here. This is a big event in my house, okay? The Lions and the Green Bay Packers. Who would have thought this game would be on NBC Sunday Night Football? And what do you expect? You know what, Mel? Go ahead. What do you think? Can you believe the Lions are finally getting a national TV appearance the final week of the year? Don't worry.
You have to think that they would. You want to see games that matter at the end of the year. And so this is a game that matters. Now, regardless of the outcome with the Seattle-Los Angeles Rams game, it still matters. This game still has meaning for one team or the other. One team could, the Lions could either win and get in if the Rams take care of business, or if Seattle wins, there could be a spoiler for Green Bay and allow Seattle to get in. So yeah, you want to play games, you want to see games, and so I was hoping, we don't get an opportunity to see very many, if any, Thanksgiving game. That's the only game we really get an opportunity to see of Detroit playing down here. So yeah, I was thankful that they flexed it, and we have an opportunity to see that game and a game that matters. The only downside to that late night game is they're playing in Green Bay, and when that sun goes down, it is cold.
I know, and
I'm sure it's going to be very cold up there. And we've watched a lot of games up there in Green Bay this time of the year, and Detroit never plays well in the cold. They never play well up there in Green Bay. And Wayne Fontes, bless his heart, he was the coldest looking coach I've ever seen in life. I mean, he had the biggest coat on, and a hat, and the ski mask. Always had a little snot coming out of his nose, gloves. I mean, he looked as cold as any coach in the world in the cold. And if I'm playing and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, man, come on, man, coach, you got to, get me out. I mean, you look at Mike Tomlin, he might just have on a sweatshirt.
Right. Same with Bill Belichick.
He had a little coat on. He did have a little coat on the one week when it was real cold, but last week he just had a sweatshirt on, man. I'm like, and a hat. I'm like, these guys are nuts, man.
Oh, come on.
Right. I expect it to be a good game. I really do. I'm looking forward to it. I hope Detroit has something to play for other than playing spoiler. The Rams have not played that well this year, obviously. Seattle, obviously, they have a lot to play for because of, obviously, if they win and Detroit takes care of their business, then they're in. But the first thing they got to do is they've got to win.
There may be some more good news for Detroit out of this too.
What's that?
What's that?
In Las Vegas, the competition board, the NFLPA, and the NFL higher ups, because the Bengals and Bills do not want to replay the game. They don't want to finish it. So they are talking about adding an 8th seed in both conferences. So if that happens, whether Seattle wins or loses, Detroit, if they beat Green Bay, gets in as the 8th seed.
I heard something about that. Wasn't that something they talked about in 2022 in the event of cancellations that they would make?
Right. That's why they're talking about doing it. It'll be a 1-year thing. It'll be just because of the situation with the Bills-Bengals game, because neither team wants to play it, and you really can't force them to. Right. So then to fix the seeding, because then it goes by win percentage, they're going to add an 8th seed in both conference, and there'll be no bye week. All 8 teams will play.
Yeah, make it an even playing field, pun intended there. So, it's amazing, though, Mel, how you talk about it. First of all, Mel, I got to give you some information about Wayne Fontes, okay? Maybe he should have had a little something covering his entire face to avoid the 4-letter word that you disclosed, which is no big deal. But I will say this, okay? Number one, I went to school with his son, Mike, over at the University of South Florida. And number two, Wayne Fontes always had Florida blood. So his voice is... had the thin blood. His blood thinned out. Now I know
the Cape Verdean. And look here, I love Wayne. Wayne was probably
I did too. He's one
of the greatest coaches in Lions history, to be honest with you.
Well, and one hell of a partier too.
Well, he had more wins. The problem was he had more losses. So we'll leave that one alone. But no, I worked with Wayne Fontes for quite a few years.
He just did not like the cold. I know that.
What's that?
He did not like the cold, and you can see that. It was evident.
Let me tell you, I've been to Green Bay in December quite a few times in November. It is cold there. Let me tell you, I've covered games on the road, and Chicago and Green Bay to me are two of the toughest places to play in December. Back then, they didn't play them in January like they are now. Let me tell you.
Just Google Wayne Fontes and look at some of those pictures of him up there.
I've seen it.
I know. Hey, listen, Candy got an opportunity to take pictures her only time there. I think it was the day before my birthday. She was on the field and got an incredible picture of Aaron Rodgers. Candy, why don't you go ahead? I'm hoping the Lions win. Obviously, that's where I'm really, to me, my loyalties are. And we got married on January 1 with the Lions and the Packers playing. Our history on this household with the Lions and Packers.
You guys got a side bet on that?
Yeah, he has.
Think about it. The Lion. All right, go ahead, Candy. There's no Lions Packers thing that would be complete about you sharing some of your interesting things from your birthday all the way to this. Go ahead, Candy. Now the floor really is yours.
So I'm a little outnumbered on this broadcast because most of you are Lions supporters and fans. But if you look on the next to Scott's hat in the background, if he moves his head just a little bit, there is a little wall hanging that says Packers and Lions. And if you notice, in my opinion, the right team is on top. And hopefully that's the team that will win this Sunday night. Now, Green Bay will be a low of 22 degrees. So, yes, it's going to be cold. The winds are only supposed to be 5 to 10 miles an hour. So, those aren't really blustering
So, wait, that means similar temperatures to what they had in New York and Carolina, which one game they did good and one game they did bad. Okay.
So the Lions and Packers, there's no shortage of them playing near the end of the season to win either the championship for the division or just to play. Now, a number of years ago, back in 2015 to be exact, on my birthday, December 3rd, there was the infamous at Ford Field Hail Mary that Aaron Rodgers threw on the last play of the game to win the game.
to Richard Rogers.
Come on,
Where
That was terrible.
Let Candy finish, Jeremy. Okay.
yeah,
Her birthday. Okay, let's finish the story. And by the way, George Eichhorn's in the chat room, and he was up in the press box with me, and then we went down in the media area. So, George, thanks for getting involved, being in the chat room. All right, Candy, go back to your birthday. The one that, I don't know. I'm speechless with this one. That don't happen.
That's
much.
okay. Then fast forward to our wedding date, which was January 1st, 2017. The Packers also played the Lions again that day. And what team won that game, Scott?
I'd rather not talk about it.
Anyways, let's just say that both teams are playing a lot better ball than they have. Detroit, especially, than they have in previous years. The Packers started out very slow this season. They looked awful. Everybody was down on them, but they've come through. They've found ways to win the games. This should be
The dominoes are falling perfectly.
Well, let me just say this much. The NFL lately has scheduled the Lions and the Packers late in the year, the last several years, because they know, not like, for example, last year, I think Jordan Love ended up playing. The Lions ended up beating the Packers, and of course, they ended up with a number 2 pick in the draft. So, and it was a meaningless football game, but they always like to have the Lions and the Packers playing at the end. Now, I will tell you this that we haven't gotten to yet that I will mention is I told you, Candy, a while back that I felt that this game was going to be flexed into prime time. How long ago, Candy, did I tell you that this game was going to be flexed? I know you're pointing to it, Jeremy. You're chomping to say something. Go ahead, Candy. This is my I told you so within the home. So if you're here, Jeremy, and get on a flight from Saginaw all the way to Fort Lauderdale, then you can get this word in, and you're a little ways away. But go ahead, Kenny. How long? Because I know this is an absolute money grab for NBC to have the Lions and the Packers on prime time. That was something that they were waiting to do. Go ahead, Candy.
I think you pretty much, when we looked at the schedule and we said that last game of the season, it could come down to it, and it'll be very interesting.
Yeah, well, I knew it was going to get flexed. And I'll even say another thing, too. When you covered your lone game with me over at Lambeau Field, I told you that I had to work my connections to get you on the field there, that they ended up moving that game and shifting it to a later time just to make the Lions a primary feature game. So let me tell you, the Lions and the Packers sell, folks. That's all there is to it. And you talk about the incredible traditions with both, albeit the Lions haven't sniffed the Super Bowl and only won NFC championship game, but the Lions and the Packers sell.
Just curious, if you fast forward a year past that 2017 win that the Packers had in that last game of the year over the Lions to December 30th of 2018, what happened when the Lions went to play the Packers in Green Bay then?
Go ahead. You ask a question, answer it.
31-0 Lions. That was when we took Aaron Rodgers out in the first quarter and they had Deshaun Kaiser start playing.
Good history like that. Yeah, I can tell you right now, I was telling George Eichhorn that when we were actually at the game, I said, George, I got a bad feeling about this. I've seen so much football in the press box. It was crazy because George literally thought the game was over. So, you know what, George, I got a bad feeling about this one. They get the old penalty there. They get another play, an untimed down. And what do you think happens? Candy got the birthday present of a lifetime. Her mom passed away. And even though it was a tough loss for me to stomach at the time, the higher ups in the Angels were looking down on Candy. Well, my mom isn't here, but it was probably arguably one of the best games ever. And, what can I say? It was tough. I want to welcome another person in here, Daniel George Lovers, a good friend of mine here in South Florida. Thanks for joining the show. Appreciate you, Dan, and hopefully we'll get in contact soon and go to lunch at some point. So
Give me just a second here. Can I just say that the Packers, and it wasn't the Lions, but they first met back in 1930 when it was the Portsmouth Spartans, and they were based out of Portsmouth, Ohio. The team eventually moved to Detroit in 1934. The overall all-time series, the Packers lead it 105-74 to 7 ties.
Good to know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good to know. I understand that. Of course, it
doesn't
hurt when it doesn't hurt when you have Bart Starr, Aaron Rodgers, and Brett Favre as legendary quarterbacks, all of whom are Hall of Famers. But hey, you know what? Give the Pack their due on this one. And yes, the series is a bit lopsided, but I'll tell you what, don't tell that to the networks. If you can go out there and put it on, they're going to be on there all the time. So, all right, so let's go around the horn here and get some predictions, Candy. Well, instead of you being last, we're going to have you be first on this one.
You know, they're both playing for something. The fact that it is at Lambeau helps Green Bay.
Okay.
Their fans are going to be behind them. I'm going to say Packers take it 30-27.
All right, Jeremy.
Well, seeing how I know that about 100 tickets were sold to Lions fans in the last 2 days of people that I know personally, but I don't know if we can get to Rodgers like we did in the first game and contain that running game. It's anybody's game, and there's something to play for now. Well, it's smacking you guys in the mouth to knock you out of the playoffs like you guys did us in 2017. Because remember, we had a 8-7 record, and you guys had the 10 and whatever record at the time, and that loss kept us out.
So with that said, Jeremy, give me a prediction.
Lions win 34-28. It's a much better game than the first time we played because both teams are playing better, but the Lions still win by 6 points.
All right, Mel, it's your turn.
The both offenses are playing well right now. It just depends on what defense shows up for Detroit. Really,
right? Yeah.
Right now, Green Bay's defense has been playing real well the last few weeks. So my concern is on the defensive side of the ball. But I'm still going to pull for Detroit. I'm still going to this one here. I'm betting with my heart, not betting with my head on this one.
Right.
So I'm going to say Detroit wins this one here. And I'm going to say, because it's going to be a little bit chilly, probably won't have a whole lot of scoring. Guys really don't want to be out there in the cold. I'm probably going to, probably 28 points, probably 28-24.
28-24. Well, that leaves me last. And I will say one other thing here about this that I do believe. If the Lions do lose to the Packers in this contest, and yet the Rams don't go ahead and win, they'll still get the higher pick. So the Lions are either going to the playoffs or they're getting a higher choice if they don't make it, right, Jeremy? So, the Lions are going to, if the Rams lose, the Lions pick becomes better. And if the Lions win, well, what can I say? A lot of interesting scenarios. You know what? I'm with you, Mel. I got to go with my heart as well. And I'm going to go ahead and 27-21 Detroit. So,
interesting thing on why players don't get injured as much at the end of the year in Lambeau. What did they do 3 years ago to Lambeau Field?
You tell me.
They heated it, didn't they?
They heated the grass, so therefore it's not so hard. The cold doesn't affect the players as much except with their hands.
You're not moving as fast. Even though you're moving fast, you're not moving as fast. It's hard. It's really hard.
Oh, I understand that, but you know what I'm saying. You're not getting crushed. What I'm talking about is when you get tackled and you go to the turf, it's not killing you like it used to, is all I was getting at.
But even breathing is different in cold weather.
Yes, it is. I'm not saying it's not.
Oh, I never had to worry about that. I was in the press box. I was good. So I played this game over there. Not that anybody wants to hear about it.
You don't even want to hit the ground when it's cold. It's
different.
Not good.
Well, Candy, for whatever it's worth,
though.
Daniel George Lubers is with you at 24-16 back, so we got to put it out there. So we have a 3-2 consensus here, 3 Lions and 2 Pack. All right. One other game I want to talk about, and Candy and I will be leaving for Jacksonville tomorrow night. The Titans versus the Jags on Saturday night for the AFC South crown. Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence have done an unbelievable job. And what can I say? Now, what I want to do, though, before we get into breaking this contest down, is we had an opportunity to see the 40-34 win that the Jaguars had over the Dallas Cowboys. And I went on to ask Coach Doug Peterson, and I asked him this: do you want to see this get to a point where the Jacksonville Jaguars are no longer a trap game and that people are going to start taking your program a whole lot more seriously? And I asked him a couple, but this was one that I included in the article that'll be on the South Florida Tribune probably tonight or tomorrow. So Coach Peterson says, well, I don't like to get into a lot of that as much as I want our team to understand that we need to be playing meaningful football games in December and January, and we've got ourselves in that position. So I'm proud of the guys for doing that. Our season could have gone sideways 3-4 weeks ago, and the guys weren't going to let that happen. I don't get caught up in all the storylines and all that, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. It's a matter of those guys in that dressing room believing in themselves and getting the job done. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, and I've been saying it for a long time, and I'll reiterate again. Nobody on this panel knows the Jaguars more than I do. I've been covering them a lot for the last several years. But if Doug Peterson gets into a Super Bowl, let alone wins one or two, this guy's getting a statue out of TIAA Bank Stadium. Because there's only 4 teams that haven't been to one: the Jaguars, the Texans, the Browns, and the Lions. And Doug Peterson, to me, is taking a situation from a year ago. You talk about what a year the difference makes, okay? And the turnaround in Jacksonville has been nothing short of remarkable. Candy, you know what? I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about this because you've been up there with me. What have you noticed with the Jaguars the last few years? Forget about the Urban Meyer toxic situation. We never even saw him. We had Darrell Bevel as the interim coach last year. But, Jacksonville, to me, Candy, you've seen it on the field, to me is waiting to erupt.
I don't think miss the Urban Meyer part of the season because I think that has motivated them and helped catapult them, I think, to where they are. Because let's face it, they wouldn't have had they not had that, they wouldn't have gotten the number 1 pick again. And Trevor Lawrence needed somebody to really help him, to mold him, to help rally the team. And I think Doug Peterson was the perfect person, should I say, to help him do that. Jacksonville is a town waiting for a team to have success. They rally around their team. I mean, they showed up. I remember when we first started covering them years ago, and they didn't even open up all of the stands. They had banners on top of some of the stands in the upper deck because they didn't want it to look like it was an empty stadium. Well, since then, they have completely lifted all of those. They're selling tickets. They're excited. I remember when Gardner Minshew came in and it was Minshew Mania. The fans just want to cling, and they want to cling on to a winner. So there's a level of excitement that I haven't seen since we first started covering them. And I'm excited where they're headed. That's what I'm going to say.
All right, and you know what I want to do is, now that we're talking about Trevor Lawrence, obviously I mentioned that the Jaguars defeated the Cowboys 40-34 and overcame a double-digit deficit. So after the game, what I did is I went ahead and asked Trevor Lawrence, okay, obviously you go into the game with Trayvon Walker inactive. Cowboys come up with a double-digit lead. But like you said, this team is accustomed to adversity anyways. How much did Trayvon Walker not playing enter your mind that you're going to win despite him being out of the lineup, that you guys can prove to people that you're a legitimate football team on the rise? This is what I'm asking Trevor Lawrence now. And this was a great answer. Yeah, today. So he answers, yeah, today is his birthday. Actually, I don't know if you guys knew that. So I saw him in the training room, and he's been trying to go all week, just doing everything he can to play because he wants to be out there. And I saw him in there not suiting up, so I knew he wasn't going to play. I saw him today. I was like, hey, we got you. We're going to get this one for you. That was what I told him. Saw him after the game and gave him a hug. I was like, I told you, this is just that's just how this team is. It's awesome. So now you have a second-year quarterback, okay, taking it upon himself. I mean, under Doug Peterson's direction, Press Taylor is the offensive coordinator. And in 2 years, the maturity level, of course, after what you went through with Urban Meyer, you probably gained 5 more years worth of maturity just by dealing with that. And Doug Peterson told Trevor Lawrence when he began the year, you're learning a new playbook So basically, forget about everything about last year, and we'll start all over. We know how that turned out. So, with that said, I want to lead up to a couple of closing questions here, and I'm going to go to you on this one, Mel. Okay, and then Jeremy can follow suit. What are your thoughts about the quick turnarounds with the Lions and the Jaguars? A year ago, they're playing for the number one pick, so to speak, 1 and 2, and now they're both on prime time, the final week of the year. Now, I'm turning over to you, and then Jeremy, be prepared to follow.
Well, I mean, with Doug Peterson, he's a grown up. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's a proven, he's a made man. He's gone to Super Bowl and he's won it, so he knows how to do it. Urban Meyer, that was just a wasted year. I think he just needed some attention, and the owner from Jacksonville gave him what he needed, and he really didn't want to coach. He just wanted the attention. He just wanted to pretend like he wanted to coach, and they got a grown up in there now that knows what he's doing, and he knows the quarterback position, and he's done a very good job. I mean, you look at how they're pretty similar. You look how Jacksonville started out this year. I think they started out 2-6. I think
they were 3-7.
Mel,
yeah, they were 3-7 after the first 10 weeks. They had a bye week and then ran off of 4 or 5 wins, and then the loss actually that they had was 40-14 to the Detroit Lions in early December. And they haven't been stopped since.
The Lions started out similar. I believe they were 2-6 in the first 8 games, and they went on a tear. And I think from watching Hard Knocks, I like Dan Campbell. I like who he is. I think he's the right coach for this city. He's not flashy. He's about business. He's a blue collar type of person. I think he has the personnel in there that they have the type of players that he needs that will listen to his message and respond to his message, and they go out there and they execute. Now defensively, you don't know who's going to show up week to week. That's the only thing.
Right.
They score a lot of points. We know that they score a lot of points, but unfortunately they give up a lot too, and that's where they they can improve upon. It's something they can improve upon next year is showing up that defense, whether it's player, scheme, coordinator, whatever the case may be. But I think a lot of it has to do with the leadership that both of those two teams have now. Dan Campbell was in his first year last year. I wasn't impressed with him. Oh boy, here we go again. But again, like I said, I watched Hard Knocks, and I came away with a lot of respect for him and his approach to it, and really thought that he was the right guy for that team in that city. And I am shocked. I am surprised and pleasantly surprised with how they've played this year and where they're at, and they find themselves with an opportunity. They're still alive. They're playing meaningful football. Usually, come first week of November, they're not playing any meaningful football. They're just out there playing. They're just trying to ride the season out, not get hurt, and get on out of there right after the last game. But they're playing meaningful football, so this is exciting for the city of Detroit.
Yeah, and of course we know about the Jacksonville situation as well. That I'm happy for both franchises. They've been down for so long, and now you feel like you have direction. If I were going to make a prediction, I would say Brad Holmes would be a top candidate to be named Executive of the Year. He's done a remarkable job, and I think his biggest contribution is how he seems to fleece Los Angeles Rams every time you turn around with the golf situation and adding those draft capital. So I know Jeremy's chomping at the bit here to go ahead and mention that in his article. I think the turning point for Detroit was when they let Aubrey Pleasant go, which you mentioned in the article. But the Lions have to avoid giving up 300 yards on the ground, or they're cooked. All right, Jeremy, go from there.
Well, like I said, if you look at it versus running backs, they've only given up a lot of yards twice this season. It was New England and then, of course, Carolina. But overall, against running backs, the defense has done well. The passing game was killing us the first 8 weeks. Go back and look. Other than, the Seattle game and then Jalen Hurts, passing was killing us. We were giving up a ton of yards through the air. And then once Aubrey Pleasant leaves, all of a sudden it looks like our corners aren't so crappy. I mean, for lack of a better term, they looked like total crap the first 8 weeks, other than Jeff Okudah. And now, ever since his illness, he hasn't been doing well. And I noticed we went from running more man to running more zone, which does suit Big AO, Amani Oruwariye, because he came from Penn State, which is a zone blitz school. So he played more zone corner there. And he doesn't look great, but he looks better than he did at the beginning of the season. Whereas Okuda is more of a press man corner. And now you're asking him to drop back in a soft zone. And that's not his forte, which is why he hasn't been looking good, which explains why he's going to the bench more than being on the field. But he needs those reps in that system so he can be both types of corner, because this is technically his second year of development, because the first year you can't say he was developed even with a Polaroid. That coaching crew was horrible.
Yeah. Now I know I feel the age thing coming when the name Polaroid comes up. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean that coaching crew wouldn't have been able to do the old Polaroids. You had to dip in the lacquer. They'd forget the lacquer, so everything faded away.
Right, TMI. Okay, stick to your zone coverages and not the Polaroids. Okay, Jeremy, just kidding with you. And keep drinking that gasoline you got there, because you get better with the one-liners. I will say this. So. I mean, what can I tell you? So we have an interesting show tonight. Obviously, I think the main focal point, what we've done for those of you that are just joining us, is we wanted to continue our discussion here on Chuck Hughes. And I don't think that there was a better individual that I could have on, Mel, than you, for sure. And I'm glad that you had a chance to address some of your feelings with you and your dad. And hopefully you'll have a chance to talk to your mom about it. And maybe at some point or another, we'll readdress it later on. Down the road, if your mom has some worthwhile things to say that you can certainly add to it. And of course, we're talking about two major turnaround teams, both of whom I've worked with, the Detroit Lions and Jacksonville Jaguars. Many years ago, I worked with the Dolphins, but in the last so many years, the Lions and the Jaguars. And I got to tell you one of the most awkward stories before we call it a night that I had. And that's this. When the Jaguars were playing the Miami Dolphins during preseason, for me, I'm on the Jaguars traveling list to come to this game. Thank God for Dan Edwards. I'm going to tell you, some of the Jaguars PR people are off the charts between David Wolf and Dan Edwards, who's a friend of mine. So I ended up joking around with Dan. Well, looking forward to getting back to our home stadium 5 hours away in Jacksonville. But meanwhile, that opportunity to go in Miami enabled me to get together with some of the Dolphins, and we got on their media distribution list by taking the back door to get the Dolphins. Hopefully that'll change a little next year if we do some stuff with the Dolphins. And our relationship with the Jaguars will continue until I can't breathe anymore and I'm dead. So, and I don't want to bring up the dead thing, but that just shows you how much I really enjoy working with the Jaguars. So that gives you an overview of the broadcast. So, Mel, any closing thoughts about what we talked about tonight?
You're muted, buddy.
You're on mute, Mel.
Mel, you're muted.
I'm glad we had that. I'm unmuted now, right?
Yeah,
you're good.
I'm glad we had the opportunity to bring up Chuck Hughes. I mean, I think that's important. That's an important part of history, important part of football history, and obviously, it's extremely sad situation. But I think for his family, particularly his wife, I know it was very difficult for her when that happened and he passed away. So I'm glad we had an opportunity to talk about that and enlighten folks about about him, and hopefully they've taken time to Google Chuck Hughes and read up some of the articles and read about him and see what kind of individual he was, and see that he was a real good guy who was passionate about his about football and passionate about his family. His son was I don't think his son was even 2 years old when his dad passed away, so unfortunately he really never got an opportunity to know his dad other than through other people. So glad we had an opportunity to talk about that, because it was kind of disappointing to me when everybody was talking about it the next day. And these people had some time to research this, and there's some folks around there who've been around for a while, and it was kind of disappointing to me that was not brought up, that people kept saying they never seen anything like this before. I'm like,
right.
Yeah, I've never heard anything like this before. And even in my, I have a UCLA chat, and they were talking about it too. They said, man, I've never seen anything like this before. And I said, well, and I said, well, when my dad played, someone passed away on the field when he was playing. I had to, let them know about that. And my brother sent over a copy of the article about it. So a lot of people really don't know about this, but these are folks that definitely should know about it. This is their life. This is what they do, and they should definitely know about it. So I'm glad you took some time to to share that with everyone.
Well, I've been dealing with this all week, and that's why I devoted 2 shows to it. And all of our shows, just so you know, aside from being on the Southward Tribune YouTube channel, have a big Google presence. I'm amazed that when we Google some stuff under certain names, that we do get a fair amount of recognition, in the cyber world, right, Candy? So people will be able to find it. And to put 2 Chuck Hughes shows in our pocket, of course, it doesn't hurt that I'm a Metro Detroiter anyways. So I'm going to know a lot more about it. But I'm with you, Mel. I was annoyed the whole week that this didn't get as much national attention from places where it definitely should have gotten. And I want to address Daniel George Lubers one more time. Thank you for being in the chat. And good night, Dan. We appreciate you stopping in when you get a chance. But the reality is this, okay? Chuck Hughes needs to be addressed every bit as much as Damar Hamlin. And I'm not taking anything away from Hamlin because it's an opportunity to educate people on the history of the National Football League and how much we've really gone out there and realized that, Chuck had no help on the field or not much. And now this is how far we've come medically, that Damar Hamlin is on the right track. So, and of course, I enjoyed talking about the Jaguars and the Lions as well. Jeremy, give me some closing thoughts and then Candy will take over.
Well, the turnaround for the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Detroit Lions have been nothing short of amazing. Both of them having really crappy starts to the season, really up and down play by the offense and defense here and there. But believe it or not, Jag should be thanking Detroit because ever since Detroit put that beat down on them, they woke up and started beating everybody.
That's true. Yeah, I know. I actually mentioned that in the story that I have that'll be published. So yeah. So the Lions and the Jaguars are certainly 2 great stories. That's why we spent a fair amount of time. Let alone the fact that who would have ever thought that these 2 teams would be on national TV over the weekend and week 18. That's the story.
Well, look at it this way: after 3-7 and 2-6, who thought either one would be in playoff contention at all?
Yeah, I'm amazed that I'm headed to Jacksonville tomorrow night. Won't be back till Sunday night. And I just came back from Wisconsin, but you know what? Who cares? No, it's all right. Candy has to deal with the same thing. All right, Candy, take over and close this thing out.
I just want to say I'm excited that it's week 18 and there's so much to play for. There's so many exciting games. We're not talking about how many players are going to be sitting down and not playing. And, I do have to say, I want to put out a shout out that I was really disappointed with anybody that plays fantasy football and was complaining about Monday night's
God.
game. And they're, them not getting their numbers and now not playing the game. Disappointed with that, but I'm excited that we are playing week 18. There's so many exciting games out there. They have all kinds of playoff implications. We're not talking about everybody sitting how many different players or anything like that. It's exciting for the to still be playing exciting football in week 18.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention too that I thought about, and Mark Mancini, thanks for being a part of this as well, is that the Pittsburgh Steelers have a chance to get another winning season under quarterback Kenny Pickett. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. So if I'm going to play the heart card, I'm pulling for the Pittsburgh Steelers to win this weekend and that Mike Tomlin still remains never having a losing season. And they got it right. Kenny Pickett was the only one that was really a quarterback that was first round caliber. And now the Steelers have.
He made some throws too. He made some throws that game.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it, Mel.
No, I said he made some throws.
Yeah, didn't he? Yeah. So hats off to Kenny Pickett. Obviously we couldn't celebrate the Immaculate Reception because Franco Harris passed away before the anniversary. But putting that aside, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, to me, have impressed the living daylights out of me. And Mike Tomlin has just proven this guy's one super dynamite coach. And there's a reason why he won a Super Bowl, never had a losing season, and more power to Kenny Pickett. So I just want to make sure that that since that came to mind, I brought that up as well. And glad we got that out there. So, all right, Candy, close it out. And I'm looking forward to being back on Inside the Pigskin. Well, I'm not sure if it'll be Tuesday or Thursday next week. Depending on what our broadcast schedule is, it'll be one of the two, Tuesday or Thursday. But Mel, just so you know, either or, I'll let you know earlier in the week. But Candy, close it out.
So if you see that little red subscribe button on the lower right-hand corner, please hit it and subscribe to see more of our great shows, all of our different lineups, different shows. If you like to listen to us, please catch us wherever you catch your podcasts. We're striving to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. You can also hit us on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. If you have more show ideas, please email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. You can catch us on Twitter at Tribune South. But again, please subscribe to the YouTube and check all of our lineups. We have different things from baseball to Inside the Pigskin to Sports Exchange to No Limits. There is no limit on our YouTube channel. Mel, tell us how everyone can get a hold of you.
On all the social media at Melfar Jr. That's Twitter, that's Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook at Melfar Jr. Also follow what we have going on here in Georgia and up in Michigan for the youth at melfar.org.
Jeremy, how can everybody find you?
Well, at Smoking Jeremy B on Twitter, on Facebook at the Motor City Kneecap Biters page, and of course on YouTube at Kneecap Bite and the Smoking Jeremy B, and at this little media outlet that I'm on called the SouthFloridaTribune.com. Under Motor City Tribune, you can find me in the list of authors.
Scott, how can we find you?
Well, you mentioned it all, Candy at Tribune South. But I also want to make point out one thing. We are very delighted to be partnered up with Sideline Sports, and they have a great operation there. Jeremy's a part of it. JB Ellis, John Shear, Jake Malik, you name it. I know Jennifer Matthews, Lewis, Jacob Christner. Am I missing anybody? Probably, but whatever. But Jacob, I see him every week, and I'm going to tell you one thing. JB, to me, he's another one of my partner, JB Ellis. This guy's unbelievable. So we have a lot of good things that we're working on as well with Sideline Sports that will keep you up to date. But what a great group that we have over there, and I just look forward to seeing that every time we could expand our presence in multiple places, and that really excites me really big time. So, JB.
I will say on the Sideline Sports, if you like to listen to an all-female show, Tuesday nights catch Chicks and Salsa or Three Chicks in a Pod.
Mention your co-host.
Megan Price, Carrie, and Jennifer, all four of us.
Yeah, Jake Malik, John Shear, and JB Ellis, to me, as well as the rest of that group, they're all good people. And of course, I mentioned a lot of people. So anytime you can develop good partnerships, that gives everybody an opportunity to be able to see more people. And our goal is to continue to reach much bigger audience as we continue to make positive changes. So meanwhile, on behalf of Candy Ebling, Smoking Jeremy B, and Melfar Jr., my name is Scott Morgan up from Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside the Pigskin. More reflections on Chuck Hughes. Candy.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.